Simon, if I don't look in the mirror, I feel myself like I'm 18 or 19 years old, thinking about the brain and how I want to study it and what I want to do. I have the feeling throughout my life that I am the same entity, absolutely. Right. And yet I know that every molecule in my body has been exchanged with the environment, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of times. So in no way materially am I the same.
No, that's right.
So how can we deal with this persistence of person through time?
Good. Well, of course, the way the molecules are organized has stayed roughly the same. It may have changed a little, but it affords us a kind of persistence which the molecules may not enjoy. They may come and go, as you say. In fact, they do. We don't count cells or count persons in the way we count molecules. That's not it. The persistence of a person has often been compared to the persistence of a commonwealth or a club, an organization. And we're surprisingly loose about that. You could have the same football club. It's got different players, it's got different manager, different ground, perhaps. What's the same? Almost nothing but the name. So we might be more like a football club than we are like a little hard atom which stays the same for centuries at a time, or a block of granite which stays the same for centuries at a time. And I think that's right. We're organized animals, and animals change and grow old and die. So I think it's right that there's no problem about counting animals. And I'm not sure there ought to be any more problem about counting cells over time. I think what we worry about with ourselves, but not about animals, and possibly not about other people, but we worry about it in the first person case, is that we like to think of ourselves as having a hard and fast identity in a way that animals and perhaps other people don't. If I contemplate you, I can imagine you changing over time. I look at my wife, say, we've been married 40 years and she's changed over time. She's not the girl that she was. But in another sense, of course, she is the person that she was. There's a persistence of memories, persistence of organization, a persistence of personality. It'll change, but there's a speed limit. It changes slowly. Of course, I know that I myself have changed in the same kinds of ways, so it's not as if I regard myself as changeless through time. But I do think there's a definite question. There's me, and it was me or it wasn't me at that age, and it will be me or it won't be me at some future time. For other people, I'm slightly more familiar with there being nothing but change. With myself, it seems slightly more hard and fast, and I think that's why there's a problem of personal identity in a way there isn't a problem of, say, bicycle identity. The famous example from Hobbes is of Theseus's ship, which goes off and it changes its planks and everything's repaired and replaced and repaired and replaced. We say it comes back as the same ship, but we might...
But every part is different.
But every part is different.
Right.
Now, we might go soft on that. In one of my books, I think I mentioned the entrepreneur who goes around collecting the old parts and puts them together. Now you've got two ships. Which one is the one that Theseus went off in? Well, probably the one made of the old parts rather than the one he's in at
So
present.
I hear this problem of persons persisting in time is really two separate kinds of issues. On the one hand, it's the question of persistence of time of anything.
Yeah.
How does anything persist through time? Inanimate objects, and what's the nature of time? A lot of questions. And then what are the nature of persons themselves? So now you're combining two philosophical problems into a new problem.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Because after all, the persistence of lots of things through time doesn't depend on the persistence of their parts. I mean, a tree's cells might grow and change over time. It's the same tree. It's the tree your father planted or whatever. So persistence of things through time can survive the non-persistence of their parts. And that's a general truth.
So if I lose my arms or my legs, I'm still the same person. I'm still persisting through time. So how much of myself, how many parts can I lose and still be the same person?
Right.
Not just physical parts, but mental parts.
Yeah. I don't think there's a definite answer. I don't think we need a cutoff. I mean, it can be very agonizing for people, for example, when their parents get Alzheimer's or whatever it might be. and their mentality starts to collapse. At what point do you say, well, she's not really my mother anymore, or he's not really my father anymore? It may be agonizing, but the only answer may be there's just been a gradual decline, and there's no cut-offs. Nature doesn't give us cut-offs. Even death takes time. So, sure, I mean, we don't need a boundary line. But, of course, we do want to say that after enough change, you don't have the same person.
Your feeling and my feeling that although everything else changes other people, that I have my sense of self is a harder core that I feel is absolutely right, and that would naturally lead to some or to support of some religious ideas of souls and spirits, and in whatever form the religion takes.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's an illusion, but it's a very, very hard illusion to shift. One way of thinking of it is in terms of the thought experiments some philosophers have introduced in this topic. So you imagine, for example, a simple case, probably physically not very realistic, but you imagine, say, somebody able to take two halves of your brain, each of them capable of supporting a functioning human being, putting one half in one body, another half in a different body, and then which one's you?
So I have this sense of a unity of my consciousness. So if what happens to me is my brain is split, there are four possibilities. A can be me, B can be me, both can be me, and neither can be me. There are no other possibilities, right?
Doesn't look like it. Right. And that seems very puzzling because we can't really wrap our minds around. We can't imagine being two people, and yet at the later time you've got two people. So it looks like either or dead. But why should we say dead? Because, as it sometimes put, a double success shouldn't count as a failure. So there's a real problem in imagining that case. Now, it's interesting, and I think very suspicious and telling, that we don't feel the problem at all when it's somebody else. It's entirely a first-person problem. If some surgeon comes along and, because of some problem, takes half my wife's brain and puts it into somebody who looks quite like my wife, and the other half and puts it into somebody who looks quite like my wife. Oh, I've got two wives. That's maybe awkward socially, but there's nothing that puzzles me metaphysically about it. But when you think of yourself going into this kind of thing,
the first-person sense of unity of your consciousness.
That's right.
Now, some would claim at this point that this uncertainty is a further fact that cannot be adjudicated by the physical world. Therefore, there is something beyond the physical to explain the self.
Yes, I think that's a mistake, but I think it's a natural mistake. I think that it comes from what we call reifying, making a thing out of the soul or the self. Now, I don't think the self should be thought of in thing terms at all. I think the self is a principle of organization of a body, a living body. And if you've got two living bodies which are organized, you've got two people. If there's descendants of one person, well, that should be no more puzzling than the motorway splitting in two, and you've got two roads. Each of them's a descendant of the previous road. It would be a kind of parenting.